about a pretty common theme of your channel's videos of late, a certain Enos Stanley Kroenke, the junior. I don't know if he's junior or not, but I want to make something clear about my views on Stan Kroenke because it's been a little bit misinterpreted by a lot of the posts and the disagreements I've been getting into on Twitter. I don't like Stan Kroenke. Okay, I don't think he's particularly good for Arsenal Football Club, to say the least. I think some of his personal politics and interests and the things that he has almost done in the past, talking about hunting channels, it's sickening. I think what he did to the city of St. Louis with their American football team was reprehensible. It's nuts that when you Google Stan Kroenke trophy hunting, you'd think it'd be an article about trying to win the FA Cup and the Champions League, but it's about elephants and antelope and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my! So those are the trophies that he apparently likes, and I just don't like it. And worst of all is his completely detached approach towards Arsenal. So I'm with everybody that is Kroenke out in those regards, and I am not a supporter of his. The fact that I'm American has absolutely nothing to do with it. But what I also don't love is when people just absolutely go to the easiest possible narrative. And again, I'm not saying you specifically.
Yeah.
But the easiest possible narrative of, spend some fucking money. That to me, it's a lazier way of doing it. So what I want to ask you is, and Andy, we'll go to you as well, because you have a pretty unique experience and viewpoint on Kroenke as well. But the banner, the tweet that ultimately I responded to pretty unpleasantly. The capital letters are "spend some fucking money," and tell me, explain to me how where your feelings are about Stan Kroenke and kind of give the background of summary of how you feel and about what.
This could be a while, but let's focus on the spend some fucking money, because you know what, I look back on that and I think to myself that I actually agree those are not the right words. If I could go back and change them, I would. It's just that I was on my way home from work, frustrated with everything. I thought, you know what? Why had the kit launches in a week? Why hasn't no one done anything yet? Why are we even going to like a protest or do something at the kit launch? Because it's the only opportunity we have as fans to voice any sort of opinion with media coverage before the season starts. So I was in my feelings. I was angry, and I just tweeted the first words that came out onto Twitter.
But isn't that interesting, though? I mean, that's kind of the narrative, though. I mean, you're far from the only person to say that about.
Yeah, 100%, because it is a narrative as well. It's been a narrative at Arsenal for a long time, a very long time. I'm sure you know how long it's been that we haven't spent like the other teams around us have been spending, but I've uploaded it on Instagram today as well, and I've changed it up. Not the banners, but the little A4 posters I've made so far. One of the things that it says Kroenke out on one of them, and on the other one it says "Show us you care or go," because that's what I believe is the next step.
Where'd you get that suggestion from?
Whoa, it was a good one, isn't it? Obviously, suggestions help. So obviously, I asked a few people, you yourself as well. So we came to the conclusion that a message like that is probably a bit better. Also, we want our Arsenal back. That's another message, because that's what we want. And it's not necessarily about just spending money. Like when we further went into it, it's about his lack of interest over the last 10 years. It's about leaving Wenger and Gazidis in charge for so long without looking into matters. It was not only the fees that we couldn't match with the clubs around us. It was the players we were selling. We were selling our best players for a long time, getting fees that, when you look back on, they're pretty ridiculous. We could have got 35 million for Cesc Fabregas, but we didn't. And that 22 million for Robin van Persie. But some of the fees, but it's not only that, because contracts have been run down. Forget Sanchez and Ozil, because before that, Walcott ran down his contract until January, and we had to give him them by playing him up front, giving him a captaincy for one game against Chelsea for his 100th appearance or something. So it's an accumulation of things. And yes, Wenger and Gazidis have only been gone a year, but I do not give Kroenke a clean slate. I gave Kroenke half this window to do something. And whether that's getting rid of the deadwood or getting in some players, one or the other, he's done neither. We've done neither. Raul and Vinay have done neither. And if I really go into them two as individuals as well, yes, I do like Raul, but Vinay is just another puppet. He's just another spokesman for Kroenke. He's a businessman, all about money. The club's best interest, the fans' best interests are not in his heart. And these are the people Kroenke is putting in charge. The Europa League final, he wasn't there. It's so many things. And I'm going to remember some more things as we do go, because I'm very passionate about it.
Well, we'll get to Josh, because Josh was there, even if Stan wasn't, because maybe his pinstripe dry cleaning that suit that he wore to every FA Cup didn't make it in time. But in any event, and we'll talk about a lot of issues that may kind of break down what we can attribute to Stan directly and what maybe is a reach. Ultimately, the buck stops at the top, and I think everyone would agree with that. But I think different people would have a way of breaking it down differently. But Andy, living in Kroenke land, being a original North Londoner who knows the history of the club and the history of its ownership, what are your feelings on the Stan and the Kroenke family?
I agree a lot with what Turkish said. It's Stan being naive with how the business is being run and was run so poorly for so long. As a businessman, you would think him looking at the books, he could see that the green could have been a lot larger. So yeah, it's his misunderstanding of how the transfer market works, how we could have sold those players for a lot more money. I think that the fact that you have an American who is not fully into the club doesn't understand that, there is that extra sell-on value when you add that the player is English, right? These are things that he should have been guided on, and I think he handed over way too much responsibility to Arsene and Ivan, and Arsene was always that individual who never hiked up prices, but yet we got railed for years and years by overpaying and we're underselling. And so that's on Kroenke for not having seen the bigger picture. I have that different perspective because I unfortunately support two of his other clubs here with the Colorado Avalanche and Rapids, and I'm seeing what he's doing. Actually, sorry, I'm seeing what Josh is doing on the base level and turning these franchises and clubs around. And I think the best thing for us is to understand what their plan is for the club and who's actually running it. Is it Stan or is it Josh? Because there's completely two different models if that's the case. I've said it before in the past, and Josh is going to run this as a team he supports, not as a business. And that's what we need. We need an owner like Abramovich who is going to say, I want to run this club to win trophies. The problem with that is if Stan's still in the picture and he's holding Josh's arm and saying you can't do that, then we have a problem, right? I do want to ask Turkish just one point. You brought up, and I'm not disagreeing with you in any manner, but you say, hey, you want to give us this window to get things done. Do we not think the removal of certain players and not extending certain contracts is kind of part of that? Because I truly believe under Arsene, we see certain players get renewed like Welbeck. I think there are certain players that he would have extended and continued to spend wasted money on. Are we not looking at, like, I look at this Kroenke regime and these new people and I go, okay, it's going to be more than one window. I think 2 to 3 windows, not just necessarily bringing in new, but getting rid of old. So I kind of look at that and I see that as a positive, that we are looking at certain players and saying, no, we're not going to extend because we are wasting money. So I look at that as a little bit of a positive rather than the negative,
Definitely. When I look at the last, let me say 18 months, let's take it back to when Wenger was let go.
Mm-hmm.
We were still in for a shout for Champions League football. So the way I looked at it was, hold on, Kroenke's made the decision to let Wenger go when we're still in for that Champions League money. If that's all he cares about, then surely he would have waited and saw before he made that decision. Maybe he's not happy with what's actually going on at the club. Maybe he thought, let me be proactive, get rid of the manager and appease the fans a bit. Like bring down the in-house fighting and all the hoo-ha about Wenger out. So I looked at that as a positive. We moved on to the summer. I think we made a pretty good acquisition in Emery. He's got a pretty good history, a good level of manager. Ideally, I would have wanted a Simeone, maybe an Allegri.
Mm-hmm.
But they wouldn't have came for the budget that was on offer. Arteta even apparently turned it down. So them two definitely wouldn't have come for that budget. Emery's took on the job, and that's nothing against him, because people do still use, but Emery knew what he was working with, so we have to judge him on that. No, because we also know that the tools he's been given is not sufficient to move us forward. So at that time, I saw all this as a positive. We acquired Emery. Our transfer budget was pretty low, but when I looked at the last year, we had spent 110 mil on Lacazette and Aubameyang. So I thought, and we also gave Ozil the bumper 350k contract. So I put that summer budget of about 50 mil down to what we'd done in the previous season, which was Gazidis and Wenger regime. Now we move.
Yeah, the Aubameyang signing was last summer. I mean, it happened in January, but that signing was made because we had an opportunity to get him, and wasn't going to wait till the summer.
But do you think
100 mil outlay in a year? So that's what Emery walked into. We had already spent 100 mil as a club, so Emery walked into a transfer budget of 50 mil and whatever he can get from sales. He made good acquisitions. We've moved on to the season, and like you said, you just mentioned a good point. Us coming out in November and saying we're not extending Ramsey's contract, I was all for that, because I didn't want another season of players taking the headlines. Will he stay? Won't he stay? We knew from November the contract was off. I thought, wow, another change in the habit of Arsenal that in the past 10 years. Move on to January now. I think it was January the 1st, the 0% investment report comes out. Us and Middlesbrough are the only teams that haven't had a pound investment from owners in the top 5 English league.
Glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and it coincides with Sven Mislintat also rumored to be leaving or ending his contract because he's not happy with whatever it is. He's either not happy with Emery or he's even not happy with Kroenke and the budget. So this made me think, hold on, maybe things are not changing. It's unraveling again. We get told that we've got no transfer funds. Our wages is pretty effed up, so we can't sign anyone. We can only get a player in on loan. It's thinking of the old days again. We push on. End of the season comes. I've always said throughout the season, if people watch my interviews on AFTV, I wasn't Kroenke out this summer straight away. I was like, let's give him the half the window first, and let's see what actually happens. I was hoping at least Mickey or Mustafi would be out of this club by now. They're not. I was hoping that we'd at least sign one player by now. We haven't. Yes, Martinelli's walking around Oxford Circus, but how dare they? If they unveil Martinelli at the kit launch, I'm going to be even more angry over there. But they're taking the piss. An 18-year-old Brazilian playing in the lower leagues, you're going to go and really release him at the kit launch. Like, give me a break. So I actually agree that there has been some positive moments in the past year, but it's just thinking of the same old stuff again. And we won't have a kit launch for another 4 years. So I believe this is the perfect opportunity to impact the sponsor as well as Kroenke and get some coverage around it. That's just my view.
Let me jump in and ask you both a question really fast. So we talk about the 110 million spent on 2 strikers. If you were, now let's assume that at the time Arsene and Ivan are still running all operations and the Kroenkes are completely naive to what's happening, which is on them, right? But they've given the trust. Do you feel like Pep Guardiola, Jurgen Klopp, and I'm maybe going to go back to Conte because he was in management at Chelsea, and let's even go to Jose. If you look at those 4 managers and you gave them the current Arsenal squad and said, here's 55 million you can spend on a striker, I think all 4 of those managers would have turned around and said, well, hold on a second. I got problems in the back. I don't need another striker. We have Lacazette. We need to shore up what's behind us. So I put that completely on the fault of Arsene and Ivan because they were not looking at what we needed to fix right then and there. They were looking at another striker, which we didn't need. Great, we got him. Joint top goal scorer. At the end of the day, we would be in the fucking Champions League this season if we had invested that 55 million on another player or 2 defensively.
There's a lot of things that would have gotten us in the Champions League next season that didn't end up happening.
But that's part of it, right?
Oh, it sure is.
Such a mismanagement.
It sure is.
Everything you just said that it was Wenger and Gazidis' fault. The 110 million, yes, is the operating money we create. It's not a direct investment from Kroenke, but Kroenke allowed them to spend it, which is fair. They misspent it, and at the same time gave Ozil a bumper contract that he's not worth, and then we acquired a manager that doesn't play with a number 10 or 2 strikers. But that's what we've done in the past year. So I agree with everything you've just said.
But it's on, and again, To me, it's on Arsene and Ivan, but it also is on the Kroenkes for being naive with not knowing where that money's going. If you're a business owner and someone says, "Hey, just need you to approve this 110 million or this 55 million on a striker," there should be some brain power that goes, "Well, why is Lacazette hurt? Like, what just happened with the 50 we spent on him?"
Yeah,
we're leaking goals here. So it's just that's my problem with the Kroenkes at this point. You know, the fact they've allowed us to spend 110, excellent.
And that's where I come from in my recent Twitter battles with people and discussions that aren't necessarily battles. You know, the personal investment angle, the spend some money angle, we need to be like everybody else who shows ambition angle. I don't think that those are genuine angles. I think those are whiny, entitled, childish things to say, and completely disregard the fact that there's a hierarchy and a structure at Arsenal, and the CEO of Arsenal, the head of Arsenal. You could argue that the CEO of Arsenal is the Raul or the Ivan and Wenger role, and that he simply is an owner. In his case, he chooses to be a passive owner who doesn't get tremendously involved because he had what he thought were reliable football men who would be able to make all the right decisions, and for many, many years did. And so again, what I blame Stan for in this is being so detached from the club's operations that he put 600% of his faith in Arsene Wenger, who has a long track record of rewarding that faith, dating back to 1996, and who had, and to Ivan Gazidis, and the problem is that he wasn't enough of a football man himself to be a student of what was going on around him with the finances of the game, with the other types of owners that were coming into the game, the American ownership, the Middle Eastern ownership. And by the time he finally came to recognize that we were decaying, which is when we stopped making the Champions League every single year, the hole was there. We had to dig out of a hole that's getting deeper rather than be able to prevent falling into the hole in the first place. That's on him. But he is the long-term owner. He owns 100% of the club. He and possibly his son Josh, who may end up having more influence on the day-to-day than Stan does, for sure, are in a position where they have an opportunity and the obligation to turn it around. And
100%.
And they're not going to do it by becoming Roman Abramovich and picking out all-star players on a list of who do I want today. They're going to rely on a team of people who have been installed for a year and a half at most, to help them do that. And so I do not that we have to apportion blame, but if we did, I'd say, Stan, show us you care. Josh, show us you're involved. We have made some mistakes, and that's a cost. We have to now get out of it and move forward. Not renewing contracts for people who are going to be distractions. That has to end by either selling them or re-inking them a year before. And they've said all the right things there. Ramsey should and was, and Welbeck should and was, hopefully the last of those. And this is going to be a multi-year process. 5 weeks of a transfer window where there's a lot going on. And granted, the earlier the better in the transfer window. They leave for the States in 10 days, and we know it's better to bed people in from the start. It's not ideal, but it's also not over yet. And I just think it's maybe a bit premature to be complaining about that. So Turkish, I want to hand it to you for your reaction. And I do want to kind of deep dive into some of those financial numbers, because you brought up a couple things, and I'm going to try this screen sharing thing to see if I can pull it off, because I have some exhibits I want to share and talk about a little bit.
While you're pulling that up, Mike, I just wonder if, say tomorrow, the Kroenkes came out and released a statement through the club that said, here's our plan. Like, we hear you're upset, we hear your voices, and here's what's happening. We were naive. We didn't really know what was going on. We left the club in hands, and a lot of money was spent the wrong way. here's what we would like to do for the future. This is a rebuilding. You got to give us 2 to 3 years. We'll make it. We'll make a change. Does the fan base then take a step back and go, okay, all right, or do we still tiki torch and headhunt? You know, I'm just wondering, like, how does this all get fixed?
It was always going to take 2-3 years. Wenger was the battering ram for Gazidis and Kroenke. He was taking all the flack. We should have been on Kroenke's neck 5 years ago. But because of Wenger, this is Wenger's fault. At that time, he had a lot of the blame to take because he was telling us that the ticket prices are the highest in Europe because of the football on display. He was completely taking the piss out of us. And yes, he's done great things at the club, but at that time, he was really taking the piss. So we had to put the pressure on Wenger first because he was taking the flak for everything. He was supporting everything that we was upset about. So we had to put the pressure on him. In the end, whether it was the pressure, whether it was Kroenke realizing his naivety, change happened.
It was $50 million a year in lost revenues from the Champions League. That's what happened. I hate to rain on the parade of the people that protested and feel that they played a hand in it, but I really don't buy it.
But when you look into the numbers on top of that, after the first year of finishing out of the top 4, Wenger got a pay rise. That's Kroenke. Why would you give the man a pay rise? That's complete ignorance. So this is what makes me believe that, yes, it might be premature so soon after he's made the changes over the last year, but I personally haven't given him a clean slate because he's realized his mistakes. But I want him to work a lot more proactively because he's realized these mistakes, not come out with a statement saying, give us another 3-4 years. Be more proactive because we've needed to get rid of a whole bunch of players for a long time. And yes, some have run down their contracts. But like I said, how have we still got some of the players we've got this summer? I haven't seen anything from us coming or going. And the quality of player we're linked with, aside from Tierney, which would be a great addition.
Yeah.
He looks a great little player, good potential. I'd be happy with that. But Saliba, he's not for now. Martinelli, he's not for now. Schubert, he's not for now.
The total age of all the people we've been linked with is, when you total it all up, it's less than Lichtstein.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, Mike, and I've said it for years now on this. We are signing players that do not put us in the same caliber of Chelsea, Tottenham, right? I mean, they're the 2 teams right above us. We're miles away from being in the same running as us.
But Tottenham didn't spend the money on those players either.
Oh no, but they invested correctly in their youth setup, and they identified players that they could say, like Christian Eriksen, they put money in. A lot of clubs would have spent the money on what's the Eric, whatever his last name is, I can't think of it. Yeah. But Chelsea spend a lot of money. United are a completely different animal because they spend money to sell shirts, not necessarily put football. And now their fans are pissed.
They also don't spend much money relative to their income.
So before you jump to your graphs, I would be and I'm probably in this by myself, but I would be comfortable if we just had one great signing, and for the next couple windows, that's the way it is, and not 5 or 6, not for now, as Turkish just said, because that doesn't help us acquire Champions League football or potentially win a league. It just puts us further away. It's such a frustrating process.
Exactly that, because Chelsea signed these sort of players and send them on loan for 2-3 years.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to sign them, and everyone's crying about we need them now. Yes, we need a defender now. But even if we kept Saliba this year and bringing an 18-year-old into the Premier League, you might kill him before he even starts. Senderos was a good young centre-back before he faced Drogba at a young age and got killed.
Yeah.
And that's the start of the end for him. Do you know what I mean? You can't do this with these 18-year-old players in this league. This league is too intense. It's too physical for that sort of player. And we've gone through the last 12 years. We've gone through that let's give a chance to youngsters phase. It didn't work out. We've gone through the British core phase. It didn't work out. This is why I started leaning so toward Usmanov. Yes, it wasn't ideal at first, but essentially that's what football has become. And we have fallen so far behind. And Tottenham and Liverpool have embarrassed us with their model. Embarrassed us. Wenger was selling us FFP is coming. He was selling us that we're saving money. We're going to be in a great position. We were the second richest club in the world the year before we moved into the Emirates. The second richest behind Real Madrid. We moved into the Emirates and now we are fucked.
Well, that's another conversation altogether, because I feel strongly if we hadn't done that, we'd be even more fucked than we already are.
And I want to just pinpoint, Matt Walker was saying in the chat, we don't need big names, we need good players. I completely agree with that. I mean, I remember I had a to-do with Claude in a private chat group about John Stones, how Man City were more ambitious than us because they spent $50 million on Stones. This was probably 18 months ago, and I kept saying, it doesn't matter how much they spent. It has to be a good player. John Stones is probably not going to be at City in a season if he doesn't turn his shit around. So I don't care about the transfer fee. I care about the fact that we buy players who make us better. We could sign 6 young players. Guendouzi looks awesome. He's a not-for-now player. In 3 or 4 seasons from now, he's going to be a fucking world beater. That doesn't help us tomorrow, and we need to be helped tomorrow. So I love the fact that we're looking at Carrasco, Zaha. They are players who come in and make us a better team. And for everyone saying, well, no, we should be looking at Reece Nelson. No, this is what makes Reece Nelson a better player. You give him people he has to fight against week in and week out in training. That makes Arsenal a better team. And if he can't hack it, we ship him. If by January he's just not up to snuff, you send him out on loan. But we need to have depth and strength in numbers. And I would rather we spend, if we truly have 40 million, I would rather we spend 40 on either one player that makes us better, or 2 players that that's just me. Yeah.
So, a Duncan, a Frazier type of thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, so and we could get into transfer, rumors and all that, but that's not really what the pod is about today. So again, this is I've been spending a lot of time in the last week or so kind of